Thank you everyone for coming. I asked for Ron to have everyone here so I could make a statement because I think it's important for others to know a little of my story to hopefully prevent anyone from experiencing what I had experienced for the better part of 2 years. I am a victim of domestic violence. I was abused by a man I lived over majority of my relationship with him. I suffered both physical and mental abuse. Nobody wanted to believe that a woman like me could be abused. I know I didn't want to believe it, so I understood why my friends, family, and my employer did not want to believe it either. I was embarrassed about being the victim of abuse, believing that as a police officer, a person who prided herself on demonstrating a strong image and personality would allow herself to be abused. I realized how it's hard for others to understand how a woman in my position, in my profession, could be a victim of abuse. I didn't understand it myself. After this incident, when I sat down and I actually talked about the number of times I had been hit, threatened, thrown down, kicked, and humiliated, I was shocked at what I accepted. It is hard to explain to those around me why I would tolerate such behavior. But for the longest time, I thought he would change, that his promises to stop would be kept, and that I could be happy with a man I thought I loved. My employer ignored the obvious signs of abuse, and when my abuser tried to segregate me from my friends and my family, my employer attempted to segregate me from my colleagues. My employer was aware that police were called to my house on a report that I was being attacked. They were aware that officers contacted me and that I said everything was okay and there was no need to come in my house. Terrified, I said this with my abuser standing just a few feet away from me, knowing that the officer would take my word for it because I was a fellow cop. Had I been anyone else, the officers would have demanded entry into my house, completed a follow-up investigation to make sure I was safe, and spoken to JR. My employer ordered me to first leave my abuser. When I could not, for like most victims of domestic violence, I felt trapped and helpless. My employer attempted to prevent me from working in my profession. By telling me I could not work and ordering other officers not to speak to me, my employer effectively helped my abuser segregate me from some of my closest friends and fellow officers. I was paralyzed with fear, knowing even if I left JR, he would never let me go. He would find me. I, of course, fought my employer's attempts to terminate me. However, even at that time, I could not admit what was truly happening. In going through that process, I realized how important it was for me to keep JR secret. I felt compelled not to tell anybody that he was an abuser and that I was his victim, and that compulsion cost me my job. I have also realized through my recent experiences that those who claim to be advocates for victims of domestic violence only advocate for victims who they perceive can be victims. When I attempted to reach out to some of these advocates for help and advice, local advocacy groups told me that they were not interested in helping me, apparently thinking that a woman who appeared capable of defending herself from her attacker could not be a victim of domestic violence. Maybe now they would realize that women who appear strong on the surface, women in professions that are traditionally male-dominated like police officers and firefighters, can be abused. I hope those so-called advocates of abused women realize that all victims of domestic violence deserve the help and effectiveness of their advocacy.